Deer lick each other all the time. They're very social creatures. They're always rubbing against each other, touching each other, licking each other, right next to each other. They introduce each other the same way dogs do. I mean, they're all up in each other's business. There's licking branches that they use as communication points too, where a buck will make a scrape, and they'll all chew on this licking branch to see who is there and smell it. And they're always swapping spit. They're always doing things like that. On top of that, the prion can live in the ground. Now, in order to slow the progression of chronic wasting disease in Michigan, one of the proposed ways to do it was to ban deer baiting by hunters, meaning that for the 2 or 3 months where we're hunting, and it's normally, for the most part, more deer are killed during the rifle season, just the first 2 days of the rifle season, than I think the entire rest of the season.
That's true.
Basically, for that month to 3 months, you could argue that people are deer hunting and would possibly be baiting, but realistically, most of the baiting is going to happen in a 2 to 3 week timeline, realistically, of the whole year.
I would agree.
That those, when you create food sources like that, where the deer are all eating out of the same pile, then they're more likely to all bite the same apple or share spit or something like that, pee in the area, poop in the area, and stuff like that. They're more likely to, it's unnatural for them to be eating that close to each other and spread the disease to each other that way.
Okay.
So in order to stop it, they ban deer baiting. That's the mentality behind it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm glad you said that.
Now, here's the deal with it, though. And this is where that's the one side. Now, it's going to be impossible for me to be unbiased anymore. So the stupidity of that is the fact that, number one, deer lick each other. The prion lives in the ground. Deer they are licking, touching, sharing food, swapping spit, spraying, whatever they're humping during the rut, they're banging. Everything, all the time.
Licking freaking.
They are extremely social creatures, and they're doing those things anyways. And the fact that a hunter might have a gallon of apples that he just picked from under an apple tree and placed them a little closer to his tree stand is not going to create chronic wasting disease, and it's not going to contribute to the spread of it. And if it does contribute to it,
we got a bigger problem.
The statistics would be colossally low, and don't stand up to numbers and science. Because at the end of the day, you should be banning apple trees then.
Yeah.
Because apple trees have a bunch of bait underneath them, and it's all piled up, and that's completely fine. Yeah. But for me to move a couple of those apples closer to where I'm hunting suddenly puts the deer at risk. Yeah. And that's stupid.
And on top of that, some people put stuff out just to bring deer in to like their backyard or whatever.
That's true.
It's only a ban on hunting.
It really
is. It's not a ban on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You can put stuff out, and as long as it's not
That's
hunting
a really
related.
good point.
But if this is actually a problem, then shouldn't that be banned too?
Correct, because it's still the same.
Like even though yeah, sure, hunters might be contributing a lot more to that. It's still some, and if that's a problem, we should get rid of it.
Right, and there's a couple things on that too. So I want to remind me to go back, and I want to touch on baiting in the winter and what that can do to deer as well. I want to touch on that because that's actually dangerous. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, going back to the actual deer thing. So you can tell that if an apple tree, you pull a couple apples, a gallon of apples or something, and dump them a little closer to your tree stand, you're not putting the deer in any more danger than for apple trees to exist. You're not going to ban those. It's like the equivalent of banning water because somebody drowned.
Yeah.
It's like you need water. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. So my point to it was this, and Ted Nugent, he went and testified in much more elegant way and way meaner than I did about how stupid the science was behind this and why they would ban it. Now, here's what I want to talk about. A couple years ago, we went and did the youth hunt up at Pete's. We had 14 kids up there, okay? Every single kid that we took hunting in the 2-day youth season got a crack at a deer. Mm-hmm. 10 of them harvested deer. You can imagine not a bunch of kids. Not all of them are sharpshooters. So, but every kid had at least a crack at a deer, okay? And we baited because we were allowed to. It was completely legal then. And that gave those hunters opportunities. This year, took 14 kids up for the youth season. We harvested 1 deer, and that was the only one that the kids got the shot at. Now, nothing changed except for the bait. If anything, there's actually more deer there now. And I am proposing that not only is the bait ban also really bad for the economy because it generates a lot of money and there's a lot of small businesses based around it, and it helps gas stations and party stores in small towns and
that's
things
right.
like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an expensive thing that everybody did. Not only does it hurt that year one, but I think year two, this bait ban is going to damage hunting to an unprecedented level. And I think year two is the scary year. And here's why. All those kids that went up north and all those hunters that went up north this year that maybe get 3 days a year to hunt, maybe get 5 days a year to hunt, off of work. Most people get 1 to 2 weeks of vacation time. They might use a couple days of it a year to go up and deer hunt. And now that they can't bait and they go up this year and they don't see a thing when they always harvested deer before, how incentivized is that person to buy a license the next year? I mean, it's got to go down 60%, 50%, 30%. Give me something.
Yeah.
But it's going to go down.
Yeah.
And the real hypocrisy of that is that the sale of the hunting and fishing licenses are what fund the research and the hopeful cure or hopeful fixing of the chronic wasting disease and other diseases of the deer herd.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the funding comes from. So by stopping baiting based on no proof and no science and no logic, you are actually preventing yourself from receiving the funding needed to actually solve the problem. And it's so often that we see, especially in politics nowadays, where we make a knee-jerk reaction idea to fix something, but it doesn't actually fix anything, and you're cutting off your own foot in a way.
You can't fix it with feelings.
You can't. I like that. You can't fix it with feelings. And the reality is that's what they've done now. I propose a compromise. I am willing to admit that less than 1%, that the likelihood of chronic wasting disease being spread because of hunters having bait for a couple weeks out, I'm willing to admit that maybe 0.001% of that is dangerous for the spread of chronic wasting disease. If they will admit that an apple tree is just as dangerous.
Nice.
And because of that, here's my compromise. Instead of banning bait, use common sense for the love of God and just change how you have to put the bait out. Meaning you can still allow only 2 gallons or only 1 gallon or whatever it is, but guarantee that it's spread over a 50-foot by 50-foot radius.
That's a good one.
Or whatever it might be, so that the likelihood goes down that they're all eating off the same thing, or that they're all stumbling upon the same apple or whatever it might be.
Then at that point, it's just like them finding food in the forest.
Right, or buy an apple tree.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't increase the likelihood of the spread at all. And then that's a good compromise to me. And I think that's what would make the most sense, and it would have at least impact. But for this season, for that, it's down. And you look at all the news articles right now, they're saying record lows of deer hunters this year. All over the state of Michigan. That's what I'm seeing in all the news articles and stuff like that. And I think this is why. I think that they can't continue to do things. Jeffrey, you're a mess today. You're slouching. You're freaking knocking the microphone over. You're just having a rough day. But with that being said, I just think they need to use some common sense here. Create the spread ban. Make it so hunters can still participate. Make it so they're not losing the opportunity. This is not the West. We're not hunting in, Hawaii or Colorado or something, or Washington, where we were able to spot and stalk and cover lots of land. Michigan is divided into acres of small amounts of forest and farmland. And people normally have 80 to 100 acres to hunt. That's where they hunt. Some of them have 20, some of them have 30. They make that deer habitat as attractive to deer as possible, and they put bait in a responsible place so they can get the deer frequenting there so they can have some success. And if you take that away from the majority of hunters, because not everybody, sorry, weekend warriors, everyone that goes, 7 weeks a year and gets all these deer hunting in and thinks nobody should shoot anything smaller than a 12-point buck, I apologize.
Goodness.
We're not you, but you're the 5%. The people that can only go a couple days a year, we still have to keep them interested too, because the more people we have in the sport, the better off the sport's going to be and the more funding we're going to have. So that's
That's very well put.
my take on the bait.